What if I told you that the debate over technology goes far beyond just how bad is big tech, and that the legislation before Congress has nuances and implications for small businesses that we need to discuss? That's the work that Rob Retzlaff and his team does day in and day out, and he joins us next to discuss those questions and more. That's all coming up right here, right now. I'm Sam Chen, and this is Face the Issues. Good evening and welcome to Face the Issues. I'm Sam Chen. Big tech. We hear about in the news, we read about it on, well, big tech social media platforms, and the debate has hit fever pitch, talking about how we rein in big tech, are they stealing our information, and so forth and so forth. But there's also a nuance to the debate. What are the implications of reining in big tech? How do we do that? And most importantly, how does that impact our local communities and small businesses? Rob Retzlaff is the executive director of the Connected Commerce Council based in Washington, D.C. They work on these issues every day. He joins us now. Rob, welcome to Face the Issues.
Hey, Sam, great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And Rob, let's start with the real basics. I'm not sure a lot of our viewers have heard of the Connected Commerce Council. So tell us a little bit about your organization and what you do.
Yeah, sure. So the Connected Commerce Council is a nonprofit organization made up of digitally empowered small businesses that all use digital tools and technology in various ways to run and grow their business. We are an advocacy-based organization here in DC where we work with businesses from across the country to help them provide skills training and needs through resources and workshops in order to help these businesses grow and thrive in the most efficient possible way.
Rob, you said you used the term digitally empowered. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, so it's a great term that before I started at 3C, I didn't really know much about. But simply put, a digitally powered business is a business that's powered by online tools and technology. These tools help entrepreneurs launch, run, and grow their businesses in order to give them the ability to reach a customer no matter where they're located in the world. You know, over the last decade, we've been talking about this concept of digital transformation and how businesses would ultimately adopt some sort of technology for their business, whether it be a simple website or a fully integrated tech stack of tools and services that all sync up together. And, you know, as we know, over the last 2+ years, COVID has really changed the way businesses operate. And this has created this forcing mechanism, accelerating that rapid transformation process to make businesses more digital. And so being digitally empowered means you can run your business from just about anywhere in the country and act like a really big, well-established business because of the affordable, easy to use online tools and services that make up this small tech stack.
Yeah, and to your point, with the pandemic 2 years ago, more and more businesses and companies have moved digital, often by necessity. And so it seems like this issue is becoming more and more pressing. Rob, I want to ask you about the legislation that your group has been commenting on in Congress. A lot of the current legislation today in Congress deals with antitrust and the idea that a lot of these social media or digital conglomerates are getting too large. And of course, we're looking at groups like Meta, which runs Facebook, Instagram, Oculus, and a bunch of others, or Alphabet, which is the parent company for Google. And the argument is that they're getting too large and we have to break them apart. Talk to me about what antitrust means, first of all, for viewers who don't know, and why Congress is pursuing this.
Yeah, so I mean, in the way that I talk about antitrust, and I'm going to preface that I'm no expert in the field, but when I talk to businesses each and every week, they have a hard time understanding how antitrust laws would impact their business. And so for them, it's us breaking down the issues at what Congress is trying to do here and help them understand and give them a little bit of context of what that focuses on. And what I say is antitrust is one of the areas of law that focuses on protecting consumers and the benefits that they reap from a competitive marketplace, such as low prices, high quality goods, and innovative new products and services. So at its core, antitrust should protect and promote competition to help ensure consumers get the lowest possible prices and the best quality products and services possible. What we're seeing in Congress right now is both political parties using any and all tools available at their discretion to go after big tech. And these are for a variety of reasons, and mainly, unfortunately, they're due to political reasons. So many of these antitrust claims coming from both sides of Congress come without sufficient evidence and proof that anti-competitive conduct exists. So for us, in terms of the way that we talk about antitrust, yes, these are very important issues that are targeting some of the largest companies in the world, but they're being talked about in ways that aren't necessarily applicable to what antitrust is supposed to do.
So your organization and you, Rob, you're not against the idea of antitrust principles, but you're questioning whether or not what we've labeled big tech is actually limiting competition. Is that somewhere in the right ballpark?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, antitrust law has been around for over 100 years now, and it's survived uh, depression, it's survived wars, it's survived recessions, and it works. I think the way that Congress is trying to propose these new antitrust regulations is for very different reasons for both sides of the aisle. I think what it comes down to is politically motivated reasons, and it's a tactic that both sides use. But in terms of what they're talking about right now with this legislation, it won't achieve any sort of new antitrust law that's going to benefit society, nor is it going to benefit what competition exists in the marketplace.
Rob, one of the things you brought up was that both sides of the aisle are doing this, and this is one of those interesting places where it's bipartisan legislation. It's also bipartisan opposition to the legislation. What are you hearing from Republicans and then from Democrats about why they're pushing this legislation? What are those reasons that they're giving?
Yeah, so kind of going back to the election in 2016, I think a lot of Democrats were upset at who was elected president, and they blamed big tech for the reason why that person was elected as president. I think fast forward to 2020, in that election there, Republicans were mad because that current president was not reelected, and they blamed the SGU back on big tech. And so, based on our conversations throughout the years in terms of getting a better understanding at what their motivation is through this new legislation, seems it is politically motivated, yet the way that they're going about this is not going to help tackle neither side's issue and solve any problems.
Is this similar in any way, or maybe it's not, to about a few decades ago, the Supreme Court broke apart Microsoft, and it was done under this idea that they had become a monopoly, they were too big to function. Is this similar in any way to what the courts did to Microsoft?
Of course, yeah. I mean, Microsoft is actually one of the potential companies that's under fire here, depending on market cap thresholds and definitions in the legislation. And what's interesting is that the legislation is so broadly written and poorly written that no one really knows if Microsoft is going to be deemed one of the targeted companies here. So yes, in a way, it is similar to what happened when Microsoft was going through antitrust issues back 20 plus years ago. But now I think it's essentially wrapped up for multiple reasons for targeting big tech, and big tech for us in the way that we use these tools and services that are offered. They're done so in a way that's affordable for small businesses to use. They like using them. And for the consumer, there's no harm for them because they're reaping so many great benefits because of the low products and services provided by these businesses because of the tools that are offered.
And to your point, Rob, technology has grown a lot since the Microsoft trial. I think back then the leading social media network was probably MySpace or Zanga or something like that none of our younger viewers have heard of. Let me ask you about the impact of this then. This antitrust legislation, you mentioned that it's politically driven, politically motivated, but the larger issue that it doesn't actually fix what the perceived problem, but there are negative consequences to it. What are those consequences on small businesses? We know larger companies have their own networks and their own way to do things, but small businesses, the backbone of our country, how does this antitrust legislation affect them?
Yeah, so I think going back a little bit in terms of the antitrust bills in question right now, there are packages of antitrust legislation in both chambers, in the House and Senate. Last summer, actually, the House Judiciary Committee passed a bill out of committee, or a package of bills. without any real sort of hearings or any sort of legislative process to give them any sort of validation. And since then, those bills have been on hold until a floor vote because they're waiting on the Senate to act. And essentially, the Senate bill that we're focusing in on right now is called the American Innovation and Choice Online Act. Essentially, this bill is a bill that would prohibit certain online platforms that preference their own products and services. And when I say preference, that's essentially a term for the traditional integration of products and services that allows them all to work really efficiently and seamlessly together. And so the preferencing these bills would do essentially would impair these covered platforms, the big tech companies, from delivering value to consumers and businesses and create just a really great deal of confusion and uncertainty about what's permissible and what's not permissible under the boundaries of the law.
Is there a sense, because a lot of people, Rob, are going to listen to this and say, yeah, but big tech is kind of out of control. I mean, how many things does Meta or does Mark Zuckerberg have to own, in order, or the recent conversation about Elon Musk buying Twitter, a lot of conversation, to your point, a lot of it is politically driven. It's, they're great when it's a progressive that buys a network, but not when it's a conservative, or vice versa. They're happy when it's a conservative that buys a network, but not when the progressive does it. But there is an argument here, right, that big tech there needs to be some rules and regulations to play by with big tech. If this isn't the answer, I'm assuming something else is.
Yeah, the answer for the time right now is write a better bill. And I think the bill's authors are fundamentally misunderstanding how the modern day economy and businesses operate. I think when it comes to this legislation and the impacts that's at stake here, it simply comes down to a way that a consumer would search for a local business, say a sandwich shop that they wanted to grab a bite to eat for lunch, not be able to see that information at the top of that search result that contains the basics, their phone number, their address, their website, you name it. And essentially what that would do if the bill were to become a law is force Google from preferencing maps and business profiles and search results that would force them to require third-party review sites that many businesses don't have access to and can't manage. And unfortunately, they don't like. I think when it comes to Amazon and the sellers on that marketplace, there are a number of different factors that are being misunderstood by lead sponsors of the bill. And I think this legislation ultimately endangers small sellers' ability to sell their products on the marketplace through Prime. And based on our read of the bill, the prohibitions would make it impossible for Amazon to continue to offer Prime services to those third-party sellers.
Yeah. So consequences that we may not be considering. Rob, I appreciate that information. We're going to go to the break. When we come back, I want to talk about proposed solutions, what we maybe should propose instead in Congress, and what small business owners should do. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
Face the Issues is produced and recorded in the studios of Lighthouse TV. Positively different.
Welcome back to Face the Issues. We're sitting here with Rob Retzlaff and talking about big tech. Rob, we left off talking about some of the challenges with the legislation that is currently in Congress, the idea of antitrust legislation. One, the motivation might not be as pure as they're letting us believe, but two, you and your group are suggesting that the fix is not actually a good fix, and there's a lot of negative consequences and side effects that will impact small businesses the worst. I want to talk about solutions. I guess the first question is this. At the end of our last segment, you said put up a better bill. And so the idea is, there is a sense in which there needs to be rules and regulations to play by. So you're not necessarily opposed to Congress getting involved in the discussion of big tech.
Not at all. The way that the legislation is written right now is very poorly written. And when I say write a better bill, I mean it. I think the way that this legislation has been introduced and rushed through the process to get it passed as quickly as possible has been pretty hastily done. And it hasn't been given a fair shot through the committee process and the legislative process to understand what exactly is at stake here. And I think during the House Judiciary markup that took place in June of last year, several members of Congress expressed their concerns with the bills in terms of the unintended consequences and complexity behind them. And still to this day, these same members of Congress haven't had their questions or concerns answered, nor have they been addressed in updates to the bill or amendments. So if and when these bills on both the House and Senate side make it to the floor, you're going to see a number of different amendments to try and muck it up and really try and get their political objectives through, when in terms of the way that they should be trying to legislate, they need to work with both sides of the aisle here. In addition to that, work with members of Congress that have concerns and questions. And right now, they're not doing it.
Yeah. Rob, one of the proposals, and there's an article just about a month or two ago, in I think in Bloomberg, and it talked about years ago the proposals were less about antitrust. To your point, this has really been something renewed from the last two presidential elections, but they really focused on the idea of increasing and enhancing privacy laws, whether privacy online or also the idea, and you know, something that my organization had worked on at the time, the idea of protecting privacy, especially in the cloud. As technology increases, we need to increase our technology privacy laws. That has seemed to go by the wayside in favor of this antitrust legislation. Bloomberg has a piece out suggesting that maybe we go back to the privacy discussion as a way of better handling this than antitrust. What's your take on that?
Yeah, exactly. And I completely agree with that too. And what's interesting is that in addition to the issues with the antitrust legislation that we've been discussing, there are a number of privacy implications too that are at stake here that have not been addressed yet. And I think it's so important that Congress goes back to focusing on passing a national privacy bill in order to avoid a potential patchwork of multiple state regulations. I think as of now, there are 4 states that have enacted some sort of consumer privacy law, with another 20 or so states that have introduced their own privacy legislation. And I think in order to avoid potentially 50 different privacy laws that small business would have to comply with, Congress really needs to work on passing a bipartisan national privacy bill that all businesses, both large and small, can easily comply with.
What other recommendations do you or your organization have for Congress in this conversation? We don't like the legislation there now. What else would you propose that they do?
Yeah, I think, and this is actually very timely in terms of what else we think they should do. And essentially, new research that we just rolled out with shows that antitrust legislation is not a priority at all for small businesses. I think, as inflation continues to be problematic, gas prices continue to go up, supply chain issues continue to persist and threaten our economic recovery, small businesses are really confused at why Congress is spending so much valuable time and resources on a problem that doesn't really exist, nor is it a priority for them. In that survey that we just came out with, I think 93% of small businesses don't consider regulating tech companies a high priority. And instead, small businesses want Congress to prioritize inflation, gas prices, COVID, and supply chain issues that are much more important to them and their bottom line.
Yeah. Let me shift this from what Congress can do to what small businesses should be doing. Obviously, there are 535 voting members of Congress, and most of us aren't one of them. And so aside from what we hope Congress and what your organization is pushing Congress to do, what advice do you give to a small business owner about how they can, as you guys say, become digitally empowered?
Yeah, I mean, it's so important for any business, no matter how busy they are, to take the time to learn about the issues that may impact their business. I know in terms of the businesses that I work with on a regular basis, time is a very limited resource. And time right now is extremely important when it comes to this, because Congress is on a very tight timeline to try and pass legislation that really is going to impact their bottom line. So first, I encourage any small business watching right now that's interested in learning more about these issues, tech policy, trade, taxes, to visit our website, connectedcouncil.org. And when it comes to advocacy opportunities that are available to them, this ranges from the level of interest that a business might have to how engaged they'd like to be in the discussion. And the reason why we exist as an organization is because we know small businesses don't have the time, nor do they have the resources to hire their own lobbyists at the state, federal, local levels. So we make sure that small businesses get a seat at that table when it comes to important legislation that could impact their bottom line.
Is there anything that you would suggest a small business leader be doing if they're looking, so you used to, earlier in the first time you said COVID's really pushed a lot of these businesses to becoming more digital. What should they be thinking if they want to begin that path to become more digital? What steps should they be taking?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And, throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, we conducted global research reports to look into this issue. And essentially, there is a gap between the digitally advanced businesses and the digitally uncertain businesses. And what we also do as an organization is work to bridge that gap and make sure those businesses that are a little bit more hesitant or uncertain about using technology for their business to help them understand how valuable it is. And essentially, what it comes down to is lack of training and education and understanding the rate of return in terms of the investment that they would put in and get out from using a various tech tool or service for their business. So in terms of what's out there, I highly recommend checking out the SBA, the SBDC, SCORE, Find a Mentor. And there are so many great programs that are not only free, but they're extremely accessible now for a business to find and work with. So I recommend they start there. And within there are multiple other resources that are still free and available to businesses that no matter what level they're at in terms of their literacy in digital tools and technology, they're out there for them to learn more.
And groups like the SBA and the SBDC, you can actually access them locally too. They often have offices right in the community in different parts throughout our state, but also throughout the country. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, there is an SBA location in every single state and major metropolitan area. Highly recommend everyone, if they're interested, check out sba.gov to find out their local SBA representative and reach out if they are interested in learning more about that.
Rob, that is fantastic advice. I appreciate you taking the time to talk about solutions. I think it's often easier to criticize than it is to actually propose what should be done, and I applaud you and your group for doing that. Don't go away, Rob. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Face the Issues. Rob, thank you again for joining us. Thank you for the conversation. I think a lot of times on issues like this, it's easy to go to the hashtag or to the talking point, but I get Twitter is part of big tech, but 280 characters is not enough to get into nuance. And I appreciate you taking the last half hour with us to really break down the issue. One of the things that we love to do on this show is get to know our guests, because you are more than a talking point. You are more than the issues that you represent. And it's one of our ways of really humanizing the issues that we talk about. And I understand, Rob, you're an avid golfer.
I am. I used to be a much more avid golfer back in the day, but these days it's tough to get out to the golf course and get a couple of rounds in. But yeah, I've been playing golf pretty much my entire adult life. Started off in middle school, started playing in junior golf tournaments, worked my way up through high school and played with the team there. Had an opportunity to try and walk on and play for the golf team in college, but decided to focus more on my studies. And now it's about 3-4 times a year that I get out to go out and play. And so a couple of weeks I'll be doing a golf trip to Lake of the Ozarks and playing Paynes Valley out there. So that should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, is that your first time on the course there, on that course?
It will be my first time on the golf course out there. They've got a plethora of fantastic golf. So my first time at the Ozarks and first time playing golf out there.
Yeah. What has been the best course or your favorite course that you've played on?
Well, I mean, by far, my favorite course has been the Old Course over at St. Andrews, and had the opportunity to play out there summer of 2019. And first, time playing in Scotland, first time playing at the Old Course, and it was memorable. Wish the round that I shot was a little bit better, but still, it was fantastic to be out there and just think of all the history and all the people that have played that golf course.
Yeah, that is an incredible place to play. I was not expecting you to say Scotland, across the pond, as they would say, as where you played. Any other courses you want to play on?
I mean, there are probably 100 plus that I could name, but off the top of my head, in terms of the number one golf course that is on my bucket list, it's been on my bucket list. Augusta
Mm-hmm.
National is by far the number one golf course that would just be a dream come true if and when I ever get the opportunity to play it.
Have you been to the Masters there?
I actually have, yeah. Went back in 2017 when Sergio Garcia won, which was pretty exciting. Was able to go on Sunday round. Got lucky with some tickets and was able to make it out there for that round.
Oh, that is incredible. The great golf connection to our viewers here in the Lehigh Valley region is Jordan Spieth. His grandfather actually is a colleague of mine at Northampton Community College where I teach, and he's an orchestra director in the region. And very proud grandfather. Every time you see him, he says, "Hey, you know my son Jordan plays golf," and shows us a picture. Everyone knows who Jordan Spieth is, but that's always the one thing he goes to. "Hey, you know my son Jordan plays golf," but that's always the golf claim to fame here in the Valley.
That's a good one. You got to hold on to that. Jordan's a great guy.
Yeah,
and a great
absolutely.
golfer.
So, and the senior PGA was just here as well, and so we got to get you up here sometime to play some golf and shoot some holes.
Let's make it happen. The weather's starting to get nice, so you got to do it.
Absolutely. Hey, Rob, thank you so much for joining us. Look forward to a round of golf at some point. But until then, appreciate the work that you and your organization do. And thank you for joining us and really getting into the nuance of what's a very complex question. I really appreciate your time.
Of course. Thank you so much, Sam, for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Our pleasure. I want to thank you as well for joining us at home. We hope you enjoyed this show. And we hope you'll join us right back here again next week. Until then, my name is Sam Chen. On behalf of all of us here at Face the Issues, thank you and good night.